Hello and welcome to Graphing Rational Functions in HK form. Now, if you remember from our HK, we know my H is always next to be your X and your K is always going to be by itself. So now we have a parent function. It is without any thing next to the X or the fraction. It is just by itself. So now what we can do is we can plug in our x values to figure out what our y would be. So if you plug in -2 in for your x, your y would be -1/2. When you plug in -1 to your x, 1 divided by -1 is -1. If you plug in 0, what happens? It is undefined. You are never allowed to divide by 0. Now, when you plug in 1 into your x, 1 divided by 1 is just 1. When you plug 2 in, you get 1/2. Now, we have two key points that we always use whenever you want to graph your parent function. So we're going to use -1, -1, and 1, 1. That could be like our starting point as a reference whenever we want to graph transformations of 1 over x. So now, based on the graph, are both the domain and range all real numbers? Let's see, domain, you start from the left and then you go all the way to the right. If you notice, it does not go through this line right here. So I'm going to say no. Since every number cannot be used in the domain and range, we will have something called asymptotes. Which is a line that a graph gets closer and closer to, but will never touch or cross. Think about, you can't touch this. We can have vertical or horizontal asymptotes, and you must write them as an equation. And it will be represented as a dotted line on the graph. Now, whenever you have a vertical asymptote for it, it's going to be x equals a number, and then y equals a number. So normally with your x, you're going to use h. And then when you want to help with the horizontal asymptote, you're going to use k. Now, if you need help remembering the equations for vertical and horizontal, you can remember Hooivaks. Horizontal lines is a y equals, and vertical lines is an x equals. There you go. So now we want to find out the information based on the parent graph of y equals 1 over x. So now what we can do is think about what my a, h, and k is. My a is going to be the number on top, so it's just going to be 1. And your h is close to your x. Okay, so it's going to be what number? It's going to be 0. And this one, a k, will be with your y. And if you take a look, there's nothing here, so that's why your k is 0 as well. So now we can find out my vertical and horizontal asymptotes. Again, has to be an equation. X equals 0, y equals 0. So now your vertical and your horizontal asymptotes will correspond with domain and range. So vertical and domain go together, and then your horizontal asymptote and your range can go together because vertical asymptote uses x and domain is x. So now we can write it as -infinity, you start all the way to the left and you go all the way to 0, or it's from 0 to infinity because it's broken up into two parts because you go from left to right, and if you notice, you can't use this x value right here. And now for your range, you're started from the bottom. You can use this, and then you go all the way up, and you can't use this line right here, so you can't use that y value, and then you go up. So it is actually in two parts. Now, a lot of times you will also see it as x cannot equal 0 and also y cannot equal 0. So we want to determine what my x-intercept and my y-intercept is going to be. Now, if you take a look at this graph, no matter what happens, it's never going to cross this right here. So you're not going to have an x-intercept and you're not going to have a y-intercept. So you're going to write down none for both because they would never cross your x or y axis. Now what we're going to do is we're going to graph each of the following and determine the indicated information. So what we can do first is write down my A, my H, and my K. So my A is on top, so it's equal to 1. My H is going to look towards the x, and then you're going to do the opposite, so it's negative 2. And your K is going to be negative 3. So it's always opposite of the thing next to the x, same as the one by itself. So now we can figure out my horizontal asymptote, and my vertical asymptote. So again, when it is a it's y equals, and if it's va, it's x equals. Now we're going to write down the right numbers. So with my we look with the k, so it's equal to negative 3. And my va, we look with my h, and it is negative 2. So now what we can do is we found out my horizontal and vertical asymptote. We can graph it. So I'm going to have a dotted line going through negative 3 on my y. And also I'm going to have a vertical line going through negative 2 on the x. Again, asymptotes are not really there. Okay? So we know this is going to go to the left 2 because it's opposite, and also down 3. So if you remember from transformations, that's what you can do. You can also go to your calculator if you really have to as well. So we started at negative 1, negative 1. Remember the key point from before? So you're going to go to the left 1, 2. And down, you know what I did? I did not. There we go. I switched it. It should be at negative 3. It should be down here. That's why it looked funny. Alright, so that makes more sense. So I'm going to go left 2, down 1, 2, 3, plot your point, and then the other one's right here. And then it's going to go close to the asymptote, but not cross. And the same thing here as well. Now, if you wanted to get exact points, you can definitely go into the calculator. Okay? So now what you're going to do is your domain, you can write it as x cannot equal negative 2. And your range is y is not equal to negative 3. So now what we need to do is you need to find out what your y-intercept is. When you want to have your y-intercept, you're going to let x be equal to 0. So we're going to solve. You're going to plug in 0 for x, and then we're going to solve. So I'm actually just going to go to my calculator and see what that is. So I can do 1 divided by 2 minus 3, and it gives us negative 2.5. Or I can do math, enter, and it gives you negative 5 over 2. So that is my y-intercept. That is where it crosses the y-axis. See, right here. Okay. Number 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing. We're going to figure out what my A is, my H, and my K. My A is the number on top, so it's 2. My H is opposite, so it's going to be 3. And my K is same, positive 1. So now we're going to do my ha and my va. So it's going to be y equals 1 and x equals 3. So now my ha goes with my range, and my va goes with my domain. if it helps you, you can always figure out what your vertical asymptote is and what your horizontal is afterwards. That's fine. Either way works. And now my domain. I want to show you the other notation as well. So it's going to be negative infinity to 3, and then 3 to infinity, because it can't be 3 for your x. And then your range is negative infinity to 1, or from 1 to infinity. Now, I am actually going to type it into my calculator just to kind of help us out a little bit. Now, you have to be careful. If you notice, in my calculator, I have plot 1 turned on. So I'm going to press enter on plot 1 to turn it off. Now, I can do alpha y equals to give us nice fractions. So I go 1 over x minus 3. And then I'm going to arrow over plus 1. And if I want to hit the graph, I'm going to hit zoom 6. Just in case my window looks a little funny from before when I used it earlier. Now, that's what the picture looks like. If you notice, it's broken up into 2 parts. So this right here is your asymptote. It does not cross those places. Now, if you want to figure out what your nice points are, go to second graph, and those are your nice, pretty points. It also already gave us what my y-intercept is. We know it's a y-intercept when your x is 0. So it is 0, 2/3. And that is my y-intercept. Now, I am going to use my nice calculator to make sure that my graph is pretty, that we use some nice points. So I have 2, 0 is one of them. Okay. And let's see, making sure, I just want to make sure I typed it in correctly. Ooh. There we go. That's much better. I'm sorry, guys. It should actually be 0, 1/3. Definitely make sure you type it in correctly. There we go. That's much better. I know it looks strange. It didn't match my enter key. So now I have 1, 0 is going to be one of my nice plots. So I got 1, 0. And then I got 2, -1. Okay. I'm going to do my vertical asymptote as a dotted line because it's not going to go through that. And also, it can't go through 1 on the y. Okay, so now it's going to go through those points, and it's not going to go through the asymptote. It goes next to it. And now let's see, do I have nice other pretty points on the other side? When you see an error, that's most likely going to be your vertical asymptote right there. Yay, we graphed it. Cool. All right, next one. Now I can write down my A, my H, and my K. So my A is -3, and my H is going to be -2, and my K is -4. So I'm going to write down my vertical asymptote first, just to switch it up. So I know it's going to be x is equal to -2. And then it's going to be y equals -4. To help you with horizontal asymptote is y equals. Put it together. If you forget what this is, it's hey. Okay? Hey. So y equals. Big eraser. There we go. Much better. So now what we can do is write down our domain and our range. So my vertical asymptote goes in my domain. And we can write it as x cannot equal -2. And my y cannot equal -4. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my calculator. I'm going to type it in. And I have to make sure I typed it in correctly. So I go to y equals, alpha y equals to give us nice fractions. -3 all over x plus 2. Arrow over. -4, and then I hit second graph. And now we can actually find out what my y-intercept is right away. It is 0, -11/2. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to draw my dotted lines for my y and x asymptotes. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Y equals. And now I got to do my x equals. And then we're going to plot some points if I can see if it's there. So negative 1, 7 is, let's see, negative 1, negative 7. It's all the way probably down here. Okay, right there. That's your vertical asymptote. Negative 3, negative 1 is right there. And then it's going to get smaller. Goes like this. If you need to, look at your graph. Okay. And it is not perfect, but it's close enough. Alright, take a look at number 4. So my A is 1, my H is 3, and my K is 0. So it's going to be Y equals 0, X equals 3. Now my domain is X cannot equal 3, and my range is Y cannot equal 0. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to draw my asymptotes. There we go. And now I can go to my calculator, go to your Y equals. And I can press delete over 1. And then that's going to be minus 3. Okay, and now I'm going to hit second graph. Okay, 4, 1. Alright, and then asymptote. It's going to approach, but not cross. Alright, well, thanks for watching. Hopefully you stay tuned for the second part of graphing.